see you.
I just wanted to ask kind of like a big picture question just about, since you've been in this offense now for a little bit, the slot receiver and what makes that role so productive this scheme, going back years, but now with Pop and Efton playing in that spot now.
Yeah, it's a position that we put a lot on their plate from a decision-making standpoint, and for that reason, they have a lot of options or freedom to get open, within the confines of their assignment. And so I think that position, if you can find someone that makes reliable decisions and is consistent with how they approach the game, it makes for a friendly target for the quarterback, and so therefore you get production.
From Pop specifically, how has he grown in that area of kind of reading out coverages and things like that?
Yeah, he's put a lot of work in. He spends a lot of extra time that's not between these white stripes, trying to understand what the big picture of the concept is, where he fits in the quarterback's progression, and watching tape to see how to get open versus different coverages and where to find the holes in zone. So he's been putting in a lot of effort, and I think he's starting to grasp kind of big picture where he fits in things. That's a very powerful thing.
How would you assess Efton to this point, from early camps to now?
Yeah, absolute joy to work with. His work ethic is second to none. A guy that understands that he's got to fight for all of his opportunities and then make the most of them when he gets them. I would say from the spring until now, I think he has a little bit more comfort and grasp of the offense, which helps him play faster. And you're seeing him then take the next steps of playing more physical at route tops and finishing catches.
Kyle, what kind of development have you seen since you guys first got him into the building here a couple months ago?
I think his play speed is continuing to improve. You can tell that he's thinking less and running more, and so I think he's doing a nice job of stretching the field vertically. Got to make sure that we're refining the areas that aren't just the deep routes for him, but he's working hard like the rest of them, and I'm seeing some competitive spirit come out of us. Pretty cool.
With rookies, is that kind of a natural process where you can see them over the course of their first kind of NFL training camp, where the mental effort to get things right is kind of decreasing and they're able to play a little bit more with their own skills?
I think that's a great way of putting it. They spend the off season kind of figuring out life in the NFL. It's new routines, it's new people, it's new schedules, and football's your job, right? And you kind of navigate that transition, and now they kind of know the verbiage, they understand what to hear in the huddle and key phrases that they might be listening for, and that helps them go play faster. And so I think that's a natural progression.
Getting back to Efton, what potentially can he do for an offense in your mind?
I think if you asked him, he'd say it's limitless. I think he's willing to do anything, and that's half the battle. He certainly has shown some versatility. We've been able to move him around from the slot to some strong side receiver stuff, but I'm just excited to watch him continue to develop and earn a role.
Is he the type of player that kind of coaches love to have kind of in their arsenal for various reasons?
Yeah, I love having him in the room. I love having all those guys in the room. They're all working really hard, and I think Efton is a great example of a guy that he isn't promised any opportunities or a certain amount of reps, but man, when he gets in there, he's going to take advantage of them. And as a coach, you just love to see that because it makes all the time in the meeting room worth it.
How would you describe the way that Mac Hollins has kind of brought along and also pushed some of those younger players to maybe remain competitive and show them the work ethic?
Sure, yeah. It started when he was not on the field and when he was in the return to play protocol. He never wavered in his standard for the room in terms of effort and finish and the way we're going to play, the style we're going to play with. He was always holding guys accountable, which as a coach it helps to have somebody when you're not in the room echoing the same type of things. As he's gotten back, it's been fun to watch him physically apply that, and I think that having a little bit of history in this offense and having that understanding of what Josh is looking for helps him be that kind of wise veteran to help players like Efton, to help guys like Kyle who may be hearing it for the first time, to help them understand what the real message is.
You know Stephon quite well. How confident are you at this point of preseason that he's going to be able to be the game changer that a lot of fans maybe are hoping he'll be at the beginning of the regular season?
I think where he's at in his process right now is where we want him to be. He's working hard when he's out there with his reps, and you see him making some plays. The big thing with him is understanding that we can't confuse results with the process. So if there's a day that he doesn't have a whole bunch of production, that doesn't mean he didn't do his job and get open. The process for him is going to have to be learning this system and learning exactly what the quarterback and what Josh are looking for, and and making sure that he's in the right spot at the right time. As he continues to refine that, I think he'll stay on the trajectory we expect him to be.
Just going back to Mac for one more second, are there any times where you see just like his intensity from start to finish of the day? Is that something that can be hard for a rookie to match sometimes, just in sort of the capacity he has to be turned on all day?
I think it's impressive that he starts the day with the same kind of energy he finishes it, whether it's in meetings or out here on the field. He's a pretty intense guy and a pretty intentional guy, and that's a good rabbit for the young guys to chase, and that is something he had to develop on his own. I don't think he just walked into the NFL that way. He saw the need to separate himself somehow, and his work ethic and his attitude certainly does that.
Go
Go for it.
Go ahead. You go, Zach.
I was going to say, how have you seen Kayshawn take advantage of the opportunities that he's gotten this summer?
Really impressed, proud of, happy for the way he's approached his training camp. And he's another player that in the offseason was kind of figuring a couple things out about this offense, decided to make a commitment to doing things the right way and the way that we know to be the winning formula. And I think you've seen the results of that with his playing production. Really pleased and happy with the way that he's been able to handle different roles. He moved around a little bit. He's put in extra time, and I think it's showing, and it's something that he's being rewarded with.
You mentioned not being too focused on the results kind of day to day, but the process, specifically with Stephon. But when you're sitting down and looking at a possible depth chart as cut day looms, and you're talking to Mike and you're talking to Josh, how do you keep that kind of attitude on the process and not just, well, blank had these 3 great days against the Commanders and Minnesota, kind of balancing that weight?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it can get hard to not get wrapped up in the numbers, right? And my job as a receiver coach is to develop these guys and prepare them to go out and execute their job, play in and play out, right? And to do it at a high level, to do it with speed, to do it with confidence, and to finish with great effort. Whether or not they get the ball is not up to me, and it's like I tell them in the meeting room, it's not up to them either, right? So I try in my evaluations to make sure that I'm staying focused on whether or not they're doing the right thing and whether or not they're doing it the right way. And if I cover those things, I'll leave the decisions up to somebody else and can feel very comfortable with that process.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good one.
The message and continue to carry the message from our staff meeting to the team, to our individual rooms. So if he's talked about something in the coaching staff that, when we're talking about building the identity that we're trying to build and create, well, that's we all share a part of that in making sure that we relay that. So he may call on us occasionally to make sure we're on our toes as well.
Yeah,
so.
That's great. Thank you. I'll let Mark take it over.
Nice to meet you, Chad.
Thank you.
Hey, Tony, Mark Daniels.
How you doing, Mark?
Nice to see you. With Travion, I think his speed is stuck out in the practice field. Just how special is that trade just from a guy who's been around the league, just in terms of how fast he is with the ball?
It's exciting.
Yeah.
Obviously he's a very blessed individual, and when you get guys that can run like that, it's unique. And so it's our job to put him in position to be successful and give him the best chance to be able to use that skill set.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question about Vrabel. I think one of the first interviews you had with us, you mentioned a story about him coming to your kids' basketball games. Just what does Mike mean to you? And it seems like he really shows you guys that he cares. You know what I mean? Even like off the field.
Just that.
Yeah.
You always know where you stand with Mike. You know what you're getting. He's going to be very direct, upfront, and honest, and you can appreciate that. As I mentioned to Chad, whether you want to hear it or not, it's the truth. And he's always looking to help us develop. As a head coach, in my opinion, he's always finding ways to help us develop as a staff as well as individuals, looking to help us continue to grow so that we can be the best coaches we can be to ultimately help our kids be the best players that they can be.
Yeah, with the basketball story, was that in Tennessee?
That was in Tennessee.
That was in Tennessee.
Yep, that was in Tennessee.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Daniels,
Okay.
yeah.
Yep. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, I think Will's a young player that has a ton of respect for what's basically expected of him. I think that he does a good job of really gaining information from our players on our team, the veteran players he goes against. I think he understands that and he said this before, that hey, there's some things he'll go out there and win on, and if you're not winning, then he's learning. I think that's the big thing that I see. I see a player that is continuously trying to learn, comes every day to go to work. It's our job, myself, Haas and Cougs. I have two guys that I work with that are outstanding, best I've ever been around. Where we can get a lot of the individual work with the players and really work on some things, to give them some different, techniques or tools, and go out there and practice it and see if it works. So a lot of that stuff is going on, and we've got a lot more practice. Obviously it's still a long way to go, but we've got a lot of time to keep doing this with a sense of urgency each day, and that's how we kind of approach it.
What's been the key to getting two rookies acclimated to not only just life in the NFL, but life in starters roles?
Well, we got a couple more than just the two rookies. I think that we have Marcus is another draftable rookie that we have with Jared and Will. We have obviously some of the younger guys. Jack Conley came in, Makai's come in. So our situation is to make sure that they have a respect for the amount of reps that you're going to get, how you take advantage of those reps, how you take advantage of the opportunities you have. How do you learn? We have three great coaches in the room. Coach Rabel's in our room sometimes, and he gives great insight to what's going on. So again, a lot of people tell them a lot of information, how they get that information and then be able to go out on the field and show us something. I think those guys are doing that every day. There's a little bit going on, and it's a growing process. So happy with the way they come to work. I'm happy with the respect that they have. A lot of times some players will be on their own, and our players are working with our defensive players, trying to get a better understanding of what's going on, trying to learn, and talking to myself, Cougs, Haas, Coach Rabel. There's a lot of people in this thing that are developing the players as they go along.
What did you see from Jared Wilson that led him to being in that top left guard spot?
Well, again, we still got a long ways to go, but he's done a good job. He's played a lot. Obviously, we liked him, coming out. But then all of a sudden, the game changes. It's a different game, I think, in the NFL than you see in college. He's able mentally to go ahead and process that type of information. He's coming out here every day. There's things that are a little bit different when you start switching positions. We're looking for versatility. A lot of our players, so they're able to earn a role on the team. So again, I just think that he's someone that's played against a very top competition in college. But I always tell those guys, when you come here, that's what you're playing against every day, and you're practicing against it. So again, I still think it's a lot like Will, where he's either winning a rep or learning from a rep, and we're trying to give him tools and different things, and try to get him in a better position. And he's been great, because every one of those guys has a great demeanor about themselves from the standpoint of wanting to learn, wanting to try things, and really just getting a lot of information from the veterans we have in the room, from whether it be Morgan or whether it be Mike, and I think when you have that type of collaboration, and our defensive players are really doing a good job where it's not combative, we're building a team here, and I think that stuff helps the progress of a player and getting the most out of it.
With Marcus, we saw him get the start on Friday. What allowed him to earn that opportunity?
I think, the one thing I think about Marcus, what I think about is, where he was compared to when we first came in. You talk about the OTA practices, and then, the players, the way it's set up, in my opinion, is, you have about 5 weeks. The rookies have a little bit less, and, during that time, you really have to work on your skills, so when you come into camp, you're ready to go. I think Marcus, and along with all the other young players, have done a really good job of that. They came back, they were ready. He improved during that period, which is probably a critical period for most players, even veteran players. And then he came on the field, and hey, we've been moving him around, swinging him both at tackles. He's done a nice job. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, but he's trending in the right direction, and we still got a lot of practices left, and we'll see where it goes from there.
What did you see on the sack fumble the other day? Like, was it watching it on film? I couldn't tell if it was a game or was just because the guy went inside on Will, like he sort of rode him in the chair.
I think it was a game. I looked at it as a game, and I think the first thing when those things occur and they happen on the field, myself, Haas and Cougs, we look at it and say, hey, listen, have we done enough of that? Have we put him in a position to really do that? So the first thing I always do with the players is I look at myself and say, hey, did I do enough? So, obviously I think that, I have to do, or we have to do a better job of preparing them to do that and work on it. And, it's something that, we've addressed this week. We're working on it. We'll work on it again today, to make sure that, hey, listen, if you get one, something happens and they get you once, and you put stuff on tape, and obviously you're exposed to it. So you better make sure you work on it because, you're definitely going to see it again and people are going to test you on it.
What is your timeline in terms of just trying to figure out your...
This is always the hardest part for me. It's like when you get everyone, and then if I go, okay, then he's mad at me, I don't.
Just wondering what your timeline is, just in terms of identifying your, starting roles there, just to, get everybody gelling. Like, how do you approach that?
That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to get the players, to the best they can be, and put them in all the different positions to see, you don't want to miss out that someone might play another position better than the other. So again, I don't look at it as far as a timeline for being an assistant coach. I look at it as far as, hey, my job is to get everyone better every day. I try to make sure myself, I look at players as, hey, listen, something happens, next guy up, everyone you have to train as a potential starter. That, hey, this person may be playing for us in some way, some point. So that's the way I look at it. I don't look at, hey, these guys are here, these guys are this, hey, this is separate. There's still so many practices left. The team's coming together. Obviously we're building the team, and then everyone's still fighting like hell with a lot of stuff left, to earn roles with the team.
When it comes to Jared, just obviously last year at Georgia, he played center. Just what was the thought process about moving him to guard? Is that as simple as having like Garrett, at center?
It's probably a little bit more insight to that, a little bit more investigative work, meaning that, he did start for them at center, but, prior to that, he was swinging at both guards, playing both guards for him. So it's something that wasn't actually entirely new for him. And, and obviously when you look at the players that they've had and the players he was practicing against, those players now have come into this league and have done very well. So, from the standpoint of the competition, there was a little bit more that he was doing some of that stuff prior to him becoming the starting center.
In terms of long-term, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this right now, but do you still see him as a center long-term? Did you guys scout him as a center? Like, how do you guys feel?
I've been in so many situations where, there's been position moves, people have moved, they've come back to maybe what was different than college. I still think it's whatever's best for the team. That's what, Coach Vrabel will decide that, and that's where we'll go.
It looked like Mekhi earned some more reps and played well the other night. Did you see it that way as well?
Yeah, I think, that Mekhi's, one of those young guys, along with Jack Conley, that, at times may not get the majority of reps in the practice, but the one thing that you look for out of those players, at least that I look for, is that, hey, they might not be getting the majority of the reps, but, hey, are they paying attention to what's going on, the people in front of them? Are they still trying to develop their skill? And then when the opportunity comes, are they taking advantage of that opportunity? And I think both Mekhi and Jack and, Alec Lindstrom, who came in here late, a lot of the younger guys, because most of the other players are second or third year players after that, have done a good job of understanding that, reps are precious, and when you have an opportunity to get them, you've got to do the best you can to take advantage of it. And I think those players are working on taking advantage of it.
You mentioned about the coaching staff and about how good it's working and been around. Have you guys? I remember asking Mike about this, and he said basically it was to be determined. But have you decided, like, are you guys divvying things up a certain way? Like, does somebody have tackles or inside guys, or maybe you're over and maybe Cougs is doing developmental guys? Like, have you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think for us, what we want to make sure is that, hey, the players, I think, realize that all three of us can coach all five positions. And what we do is we rotate ourselves around. So this way, we all know what we want it to look like. We're coordinated in that, and we haven't decided, hey, you have this, you have that, you have this. We're all coaching. We're all watching them, and I think, like I said, I think it's an opportunity for us where we've been getting probably the extra reps in the individual periods. By the way we were doing it. I think that's something that could be beneficial for all of our players, veterans and younger players alike as we continue to move forward.
Two more guys.
That's it. Perfect.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Getting a ton of reps. So you have to be able to learn just as well as a starter without taking any of the physical reps, and then go in the game and be expected to run the system as well as a starter. So for being a guy going into his 6th year or 7th year, I'm not sure on the exact number of years, but consistently having that role, it goes to show the mindset, how he goes about his work, and then how he takes advantage of every opportunity that he gets.
One more question for you on Ben. One of the things that we've noticed from him is literally 10, 15 yards back.
Yeah.
He's behind the offense, and he's going through the whole routine. He's pointing out the linebacker. He's going. Is that something that he picked up from you, or is that something that he's kind of done?
I'm not going to take all the credit for that.
Okay.
It's just something we talk about in the quarterback room, is stealing reps and taking advantage of every opportunity. So if you can stand in the back and take yourself through those mental reps, that's almost the same as getting the same rep as Drake. So you've gotten the same look. And then it's kind of cool to be able to compare, would I have done the same thing that the starter just did? And if not, when he comes off the field, then they can talk about it and have that discussion. And then the other thing is, after practice, he takes my script and then he goes through the entire script himself with the other receiver. So I think by him doing that, he's really doubling his reps. He's getting all the Drake's reps, all the Dobbs' reps, and then he's getting his on the back end. So I think he's doing a good job.
Is that a common thing? I've never seen it out here before, but with a guy who's that, it's like watching a guy in the Yandex circle.
Yeah.
To use the baseball analogy, where he's just kind of like watching the pitcher and kind of measuring and stuff. And is that something that's a common occurrence, or is that something unique?
I think so, with the quarterback position especially. I think when you see the called periods of practice, the entire offense is on the sideline, but the quarterbacks are usually standing right behind. And it's because they're taking themselves through that same exact rep. So I know we used to do it in Cleveland my last couple of years, and I'm sure it's a common practice amongst quarterbacks throughout the NFL. Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Ashton, Mark Daniels.
Hey, Mark.
Nice to meet you. This is your first offseason with Drake. What would you say? What have you learned about him? I was asking you, biggest thing. What have you learned about Drake?
I would say he's mature beyond his years. You almost forget he's a 22-year-old kid at times. Right. He comes out here, he puts his best foot forward every day. He works super hard. He's intentional every time he comes out here. And I think I'm pleased with where he's at and what he's done. But I think that's the biggest thing. When you hear about a 22-year-old kid, you don't think you're going to get the level of maturity that you get with Drake.
Right. Obviously, he's learning a new system. It might be like his third or fourth new system.
Going back to college?
Yeah, going back to college.
Yeah.
So how has he done with from that standpoint of just learning and growing in this scheme?
I think, this early in his career, going through those different systems it benefits him, because now he's learned how to teach himself a system. What study habits does he have to do to, to own down on everything? And I think he's done a good job. I think experience is the biggest teacher. So him being out here physically being able to do it, that's why I think it was big for him to play in the preseason game, and him and Josh get on the headset with each other one time during live action. I think that part's has been awesome, but I think he's doing a good job picking everything up. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. Thank
Mind if I ask you a question over here, just so the sun's in here?
Got his mask on.
What a guy. Got you. Good time. Just your thoughts on just his leadership role. How did he respond after the fumble this weekend?
I think he responded great. I think, it helps when we're in the preseason and these things don't typically have a, definitely effect on you, but I think it's a great opportunity to learn from some things and what we can and can't do. So I think he responded well. He was involved in the game the entire time, cheering on Dobbs when it was Dobbs' turn. Same thing with Ben. But responded well, like he should.
What, just in terms of what you see in the locker room from him on a day-to-day, I mean, just what has his leadership role been like in there in terms of his vocal leadership?
He's vocal. When he sees something that he likes or doesn't like, he says something, whether it be something with the protection or something with a route concept or even something with himself. He does a good job taking ownership of his mistakes, which I think goes a long way with the other guys in the room. And I think he's taken a little bit of a step even
the further along we get in training camp. The more comfortable he gets, the more comfortable he is.
I wanted to ask you about Downing, actually.
Yeah.
Obviously didn't get opportunities during the joint practices, but seemed to take advantage of them in the preseason. And what do you see from him in general in the preseason?
I thought he did a good job operating the system, which is, the first thing. We have to be able to have 11 guys on the same page to start each play. And then I think once he settled down and got going into the drive, I thought he delivered some nice balls. I thought he, read it out the right way. There was one, questionable read in there, and he knows what I'm talking about. But I think he's done a good job taking advantage of the reps. I was just talking previously about him standing behind every rep and taking himself through the mental reps. So I think he's done a good job with that.
I'm sure you've been asked about the strip sack play, so I apologize. But
no
I just wanted to ask you, did you feel like Drake was reading it out correctly? Because they looked like they kind of post snap rotated there on him a little bit.
Yeah, I think Drake's eyes were correct in that point of view. I think we just have to understand what happens when we don't get the exact look that we want. Pre-snap he was doing what he was supposed to do, and then when the look's not there, just understand the situation of the game. And I think that is a perfect time to teach about that moment, and that's what I love the preseason for. That's why I'm super excited he's getting reps in the preseason, so we can just talk through those situations so they don't show up in the regular season.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.